What's going on, everyone? This is your girl, Michelle Pierre for Espresso Unicorn, and we are back with our Black Voices podcast. And I am so excited. You know, I'm always excited about our guests because we only have the best on here. But today we have Matt Campbell with us today. And I'm just going to give you a tidbit of the background. Y'all know how I do. I don't like to spill the beans with everything. I like them to kind of come in and tell us about themselves. But Mac is a retired major from the United States Army. If I'm right, I believe you have 29 years in the Army. Is that right, Mac?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to him. I will say this, he has a beautiful, beautiful family. So I hope he tells us about them as well. But Mac, please take it away.
Hi, my name is Major Retired Makonen Campbell. I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. I joined the Army in 1993. From there, I did my basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Lost in the Woods. After that, I went to Fort Sam Houston for my training as a combat medic. And then after that, I went to Fort Polk. Fort Polk was actually my first assignment in the Army, and it was a time. I spent 8 years, almost 8 years there total in my military career. But my first 4 years in the Army, I spent at Fort Polk. Thought about getting out of the Army, but realized that I had a family to feed, and so that was a determining factor in staying in the Army. And then from there, it was every 4 years I was always getting out of the Army, and then eventually I found myself here at 29 years in the Army. Now, if I give you a little bit of history about myself, because I'm a historian, um, I being born in Charlotte, I had a strong family group around me. My mom and dad were, um, next door neighbors, if you will. They were right behind one another, and so my both my grandparents were in my life. Both my parents have always been in my life, and that kind of colored how I viewed the world. I ended up having children really early on, so I was a teenage father, and that was one of the things that drove me to kind of search out a career that would be, I don't know, I would say a means of taking care of my family for sure, providing for them, but also making sure that I was able to turn this into a career. I searched around for jobs both in Charlotte and then in Dallas, Texas. Found out that I didn't like roofing, tarring roofs. I didn't like the textile industry. I didn't like working nights, and so eventually everything came to a head, and I joined the Army. Probably one of the best things I've done
Mhm.
because the Army's done a lot for me in terms of providing me a lot more stability in my life as an adult. It provided me with a means to take care of my kids. I gotta love that TRICARE insurance, right? But I definitely took care of my kids, and then I met my wife here. I met my wife in the military, and we've been together for almost 20 years. We've got 7 kids. We've got 5 grandkids. We've got one, two, three in-laws, and so our family's just getting bigger and bigger. And I say all of that because the family drove me to the military. Family is what made me stay in the military, and I'm not saying that in means of something economical. It was more my wife was in the military, and so we were having fun. And as long as we were having fun, neither one of us were gonna get out. Um, I got degrees in the military. I got all of my degrees in the military. I've got a bachelor's in history. I've got a master's in social organization, or yeah, organizational leadership, and then I have another master's in history. And I'm currently working towards my PhD here at Texas A&M. And so that's all due to a couple of things. It's my wife. She drove me towards getting my education because at one point I was just going to retire out, and this was some 10 years ago. But once I realized that there were other options for me in the military, well, here I am. I found myself going to OCS. Joined, got selected to go to OCS, and
OCS.
Officer Candidate School.
You know, folks don't know these acronyms. You
Yeah,
gotta you gotta
I
spill the
keep
beans.
forgetting I was in a zone, but yeah, officer candidate school. So I was selected to go to officer candidate school. That's about, I want to say 12 weeks of training. I forget, it's a blur, and we had a Christmas break, so mine's actually was about 14 weeks long. So I went through officer candidate school, and it came out on the back end of that as an armor officer. So I went from being a medic to an armor officer, and then
Mhm.
from there it was nothing but driving tanks, Bradleys, Strikers, having a great time, and deploying. I can't say that the deployments were always fun. Some of them were actually pretty, you know, dangerous, but some deployments were actually pretty decent. Had a trip to Kuwait. I did a deployment to Kuwait. Did a deployment to Bosnia, and then I've got multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. So here I am.
Yeah,
I'm on the I'm in the twilight of my career. No, um, here I am in the on the back end of a career, and now I'm trying to figure out what it is to be an adult again.
that's awesome.
I've had a great time doing what I've been doing, and so when I retired, it wasn't necessarily because I was um, tired or fed up with anything. It was more so because I, I I saw the value of spending time with my family, and I spent so much time away from my family that I didn't want to sacrifice that anymore. And teaching at West Point kind of taught it put that into perspective for me. Um, I realized that I
So,
was long in the tooth for as an officer, and so that kind of made the decision a little bit easier. Yes, ma'am.
yep. So let me back up on you. So you just gave us a whole lot. What I want to say first is thank you for your service. So
Thank
amazing,
you for
29
supporting me.
years. Absolutely. 29 years is not a easy feat at all. And then also being on the enlisted side for 15 years, is that right?
Yes, 15 years.
Okay. And then shifting over to the officer side. Wow. Um, the second thing that I heard is that your family, right? And you were very specific about saying this. Your family is why you went in, your family is why you stayed in, and now your family is also why you're departing, right? And
Yes.
so, as you look at all of that, I mean, that's just a journey in itself. But where I kind of want to pull some strings at, and you were just starting to get into it, you have gotten an amazing education since being in the military. So I know a lot of people have this mindset that the military is all about, running through, especially the army, right? Running through the woods and shooting people and
Yeah.
deploying and all of these different things, which I mean, some of it is true, but there's so much more to the army and to the military outside of that. And so, if you can kind of just talk very quickly about your journey as it relates to being an organizational leadership master's degree, right? Being a history master's degree, like from Clemson, right? Like, how did you get on that path, and how did those doors open up for you in the military?
That's that's a long journey. My introduction to college was actually as a civilian. So this is back in the day when we were correspondence courses were done by paper, and I was trying to work to feed my kids. And so I tried to go to Central Piedmont Community College, CPCC. This is in downtown Charlotte, and I couldn't go to the classes. So they hand me this paper book. I've got a bunch of floppy disks that I got to stick into this old school computer, and I'm trying to uh, work towards a degree. At least in my mind, I thought that was what I was going to do. That lasted about 3 months. It was painful. There was no connection anywhere. There was just me filling out papers, and so I walked away from it. And I just reckoned with the fact that I was going to get an education and that I was going to find my own way. And then I joined the military. And so when I joined the military, I ran into I had a great cast of individuals in my life, from the beginning of my career to the end. And I'll point out Sergeant Parker And Sergeant Parker, pulls me, young Private Campbell, aside and says, "Hey, are you going to college?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to college. It's crazy." And so she says, "Oh, you're gonna sign up right now." Well, me being the good soldier I was, I went and signed up, and I signed up at Central Texas College, and it was English. It was English. It was core courses because the idea was that you get your core courses done now, you can transfer to any school you want and complete your degree. Had no idea that's how things worked. I just knew that Sergeant Parker made me go to school, and it got me out of work early by an hour. So there was an incentive there, and so I did that, and I realized that it wasn't this big scary thing, but I also understood that it was going to be a long march towards the degree because of the job. I'm a working student, and it's difficult to carry a full load while also doing all the things that the Army wants you to do. So it was a difficult. I won't say difficult. It was. I don't want to call it difficult. It wasn't difficult. It was a long walk, and I had to be patient in pursuing the degree. Um, I finally achieved it. Now, mind you, this is in 1995 when I met Sergeant Parker. So 1995, and from 1995 until 2011, the only thing I had was an associate's degree. And the only reason I got that associate's degree is because my wife, once we got married, I realized that she was going to college. She's super smart, and I saw her working towards a degree. And when I heard that she was on her way to get an associate, I was like, "Oh, I got to get an associate." So it became a competition.
Mhm.
And so I got my associates. I think she got her associates first, but I got my bachelor's first. But
Mhm.
I when I got my bachelor's, I had signed up. I was selected to go to OCS, and so here I am going to OCS without a degree. This is a time when you could do that. Now you got to have a degree. I was 1 year short of a degree, and when I left OCS, it was under the understanding that I had to have my degree before I made captain, or I had to get out. And so what I did there was I go to my first unit. It was 6'9" Cav and First Cavalry up at Fort Ocasio, right? I think it's Ocasio now. Cavasio, that's what it's called. But
Cavazio. Yeah.
right, the old Fort Hood. But I I um I show up to the unit, and I immediately get told that we're getting ready to deploy. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm supposed to have time to get a degree. And they're like, yeah, you could do that, or you can deploy. Those were my options. I could stay back and get the degree, or I could go deploy. And so obviously I was going to deploy because who's going to stay back? So I deploy, having 1 year left on my to get my degree, and I absolutely struggle to finish that degree while in Iraq because of the connectivity issues we had, because we were always moving from one post to another post, and actually finished my degree. I remember this, December 12th, 2011. I finished my final exam in a sandstorm while getting mortared.
Hmm.
And so, bombs were dropping in on the base, and I wasn't gonna leave my living quarters, because if I did, I remember texting or emailing my instructor, and I told him, "Hey, if I lose connectivity, this is why." And he did not care. He was like, "Hey, you're gonna turn this in, or you're gonna fail the class." I'm like, okay, well, here I am. I'm gonna turn this in. So I, push send on December 12th, 2011, and obviously I passed the final exam, and I got my bachelor's degree, and that was 1994 to 2011. Got my bachelor's degree. When I went to get my master's degree, I was in the career corps. So the back then it was General McMaster's. He was running Fort Benning, or at least the maneuver center, and he had a program where he would send you to get your master's, and that meant that you'd spend an entire year at Fort Benning versus 8 months. And so that sounded good to me. And I signed up for it, interviewed for it, was selected for it, and ended up going to Columbus State University to get my master's in organizational leadership. It gave us a lot of credit for the career course itself, but we were actually in class for an entire 2 semesters to finish the rest of it. And so that
Mhm.
was fun. We did that while we were in the career course, and then we had the rest of the time on the back end of the career course to finish it. and I left with my first master's degree. Now, mind you, this is someone who graduated from high school with like a 2.6 GPA. My undergrad GPA was a 2.959, which still irritates me, and technically it should have been a 3, but that's neither here nor there. And then now
Crushing it in college.
right. And I find myself in a master's program, and I graduate with 3.9, and then I'm happy. I've got a master's degree. I've done more than a lot of people have done academically. And so when I ended up getting into my second master's, it was because I had made connections with General Sedgley, who was at that time, I don't even know if he was the department head at this time. I think he may have been the deputy at that time, but
Mm-hmm.
he was the deputy at the history department. And I remember calling him up, and or one of his representatives up, and I was like, "Hey, I'm Captain Campbell. I haven't had command yet. How do I good night, babe. How do I become an instructor?" And so he goes, "Hey, here's what you got to do. You got to get command." I was like, "Okay, awesome. I'm pretty sure I'll get command." He's like, "All right, I can't give you that off. I'm pretty sure." He says, "But if you get command and if you're successful, then what we'll do is we'll send you to school on the back end to get your master's degree."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Okay." And I waited a little bit. I ended up working up in the division headquarters for the Fourth ID in Fort Carson, and I got a phone call from General Sedgley who said, "Hey, we're gonna pick you up." I was like, "I haven't had command yet." He's like, "Yeah, but I read your bio. I saw I've seen your resume." He says, "I understand what you're working on. I want you in the department." And I was like, "Okay." He says, "I'll give you 3 days to decide. Go talk to your wife." And I was like, "I'm not gonna talk to my wife. I'll take the job." And so I took the job, and then I talked to my wife and let her know that I'd been selected to go teach at West Point as a history instructor. So after command, I working in G35, I was able to make connections throughout the division so that I was able to get a good job. I ended up going to 2-1 Cav, First Striker Brigade in order to command. And so I go into that position, and I gave it my all. It was like, hey, I know what my future holds, but I'm here to work, and so let me work. And so everybody kind of understood that. And after I got done with command, I actually handed my guide on over to Tom McShay, Captain or Major McShay, and he's working in the history department right now. So I handed my guide on to Tom, and then I went to school at Clemson. And here's the side note to that: my kids had gotten Clemson and at UGA, University of Georgia, and there was no way that I was going to go to school with my kids. So it was, hey guys, you got a choice to make. You're either going to go to Georgia and I'm going to go to Clemson, or you're going to go to Clemson. I'm going to find another school to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And they chose UGA. I ended up at Clemson, and I had some time where I could actually sit down, take a break, and then learn. And so for me, this is what drew me to academia, is the fact that I was able to kind of synthesize the information I was receiving. I was able to think about it, how to approach it, and I was like, man, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. I like it. And yeah, I graduated from Clemson. And so when I graduated from Clemson, that was my second master's. I'm probably the most educated person in out of my mom and dad's family. And then with me and my wife, education's the thing, in our house. So and my wife's got 3 degrees, I've got 4 degrees. This is what we do. The Army
Mm-hmm.
has allowed me to do that, and it's because of all of the things that they were offering. The tuition assistance benefits. At one point, you had to pay at least 25% of it, and then the Army was paying for everything, which made education more accessible for people who wanted to do it. And I enjoyed it, so I took advantage of it, and it was a little
That's
bit of
awesome.
competition. There's a little bit of competition between me and the wife. I didn't want her to beat me to any degrees, but
It's healthy competition, though. That's what that sounds like, healthy competition.
it was. And I say that because she was the driving factor in a lot of my academic pursuits. It was,
Hmm.
hey, you got this. She was always supportive. She's, hey, you got this. And I was like, oh, this sucks. I quit. And she's like, you can't quit because if you quit, you know, what's everybody gonna say about you? What's your family gonna think about you? What are your kids gonna say? And so she's a big motivating factor in me doing what I've done and even what I'm doing now in terms of pursuing the PhD because you know, it brings things full circle to complete a PhD in history and then walk away as a professor or you know at least have a doctorate out of all the things that I've done, how my life started out. So you know, it's good.
So amazing. So that's kind of the journey that you just told is the reason why I asked about it, because there is this preconception about the military and the lack of opportunities in the military, when in fact there is an overabundance of opportunity in the military to really, what I like to say is change your last name, right? So change that legacy of what,
Yeah,
of what and where you came from. And it's not just about the degrees. Maybe it's about the jobs that you actually execute and you work within the military, because even outside of the degree structure, you're still being trained and you're still going to school in some type of capacity to continue learning. Obviously, we know on the officer side, it's a requirement, it's a gate if you want to
yeah, yeah.
continue to, put on rank. And then also on the enlisted side, you also see that now too. So most enlisted people have at least a master's degree by the time that they get out, which I think is amazing, because at least when my dad was serving, that was nothing that they really talked about. It was possibly some correspondence courses, but at the end of the day, no one was pushing you to get a degree. And so that's where I think, the military is doing a great job with really preparing people to be able to think on a more complex level. And then when it's time for you to leave the military, you actually have tangible skills that people see on a piece of paper, but also what you have between your ears. So amazing. Thank you for telling that story and walking us through kind of your process. And so you just spoke about getting your PhD, which is no easy feat at all. But let me ask you this. What is your desire? What's your end state as it relates to getting your PhD? I know academia is something that you love, but then I've also heard in kind of your journey in life that you believe in service, right? So how does this PhD allow you to tie that service back in? And then something that we had talked about before, I'd love for you to tell us what the background is with your name. I know we call you Mac, but what's the background of your name? So if you can kind of talk about those two things, that would be great.
Yeah, so you know, with the PhD, and this is you know a question I've heard a lot, especially from you know people that are hiring. Right? People are hiring out here in Houston, Texas, and they're like, "Why do you want to get a PhD?" And for me, it does a couple of things. It provides me with insight on how to observe problems that I see or that I research about. I do research on civil rights and urban renewal, but it allows me to understand those problems and how to approach them in a way that I'm able to present them to people and provide them with answers. Right? And even though that's not what historians do, I'm always looking for answers. And I mean, I've always been inquisitive. I've always been curious about the world. I've always wanted to know the, you know, how things work, I'm not doing this purely for the pursuit of knowledge. It's there's a goal at the end of the or you know a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is like you said, service. Now, what that service looks like, I have in my mind that I want to run for political office here in either you know Houston or if we move back to you know North or South Carolina, I'm there. I don't want to let that slip through in terms of the opportunities that presents for me to push this idea of service, push this idea of you know this apolitical you know movement that we have in the army. I don't want to call it a movement, but we're apolitical in our approach. And I think if more people were that way, then we'd see a lot of things happening to the benefit of society.
Right.
And then I would also like to do consulting, but really, that is my way of maintaining a touch with the military. And I thought when I retired that I would want to walk away from the military, just take a uniform off and say, all right, I'm done. I grew my beard, threw an earring in, and I wear a little bit of jewelry now. And so that I'm still like, oh man, I miss it. I'm looking for those touchstones. I had a sergeant major call me this morning, and he wanted to talk to me about getting folks into West Point, or not getting them into West Point, but applying to come and teach at West Point because he's known me for 15 years. Um, I still maintain touch points with the history department over there at West Point. I still maintain touch points with cadets who are. I'm in a PL 300 class right now. I thought I'd given up, working for West Point, but apparently I'm still working for West Point. So I'm always looking for opportunities to serve. I'm always looking for opportunities to share my knowledge and understanding of things in hopes of making things better. So if that's done at the corporate level, or if that's done in a consulting format, or if that's done as a city councilman, then I think that's where my path is going to lead. The PhD is just a means of getting my mind right so that I'm able to be intelligent talk intelligently about the things that I'm passionate about. And
Okay.
I still got to do my research, and I still want to be able to go, all right, this is what I see and this is how I see it. But that's, for me, the end state is service. As much as
Okay.
I didn't want to admit it, earlier on when I was getting ready to retire. I was like, oh, I'm done, I'm done. No, I can't. I can't, because I've been doing this for 30 years. Even though Major Campbell has retired, the servant leader in this guy still exists.
That's right. Yeah, there's no way that you can just take that off, right? You know, I think everyone has the capacity to serve, right? But the people who truly decide that that is what they're going to do, those are selfless people, and those are people who have committed their lives to making others a bit better, right? Or helping others to learn from the mistakes that they made. Versus, walking down that street and having, the type of time that we may have had going through, call it old, or whatever the case is, but at the end of the day, wisdom is important, and then the desire to actually share those lessons learned. And then, oh, now by the way, you have this education that will hoist up, also that wisdom of that experiential learning. I mean, you can't replace that. And then your heart to give, right? Your heart to serve, and your heart to kind of be within that gap, and close that for people. So no, I commend you for that. But what I heard you say too is that, as it relates to the PhD, I heard something about civil rights. And so again, I want to tie that back to, what does your name mean? Why did your mom name you this name? I'm not gonna let you get away from this. You told me it was okay for me to ask you this question. So now this is the third time I'm bringing it up, and you got to give it to us now. Tell us about it.
All right, so my name is Makonen Atu Campbell. And so the story behind the name is my mom and dad. I'm a 70s baby. My mom and dad, they grew up watching the civil rights movement. They were, I don't want to call them victims. They weren't victims, but they experienced their experiences, their lived experiences were through that prism. And so, in the 70s, I want to say early 70s, Alex Haley wrote a book, or published a book, Roots, and then the movie came out.
Mhm.
And so my mom had read the book, and she wanted her child to have something that was reflective of our African heritage. And so, as she was looking through names, there was a myriad of names that had popped up on the slate. But because of Roots, one of the names was Kunta Kinte. The other one was the one that I've got now. And so she decided, actually, I think it was my dad who decided that it was going to be May Queen, because he didn't value in the name of his son, Kunta Kinte, because it just rolls off the
Yeah.
tongue right? And then the connotation to that name would have had me fighting for the majority of my high school and middle school, elementary school years.
Yeah.
So the name, it's a title, so it means magnificent, and then Atu means prince. And so when my mom and dad got married, they came up pregnant with my two younger brothers, and I'd been bugging them for a brother for the longest. Ended up with two brothers. And so when Dia was born, my mom asked me what name or what did I want to give him, and I didn't want to give him anything material. And so here I am. I think I was 7 when Dia was born, and I said, hey, I would like for him to have my middle name. And so mom was taken aback by it, and so Di ended up with Atu. And then my youngest brother popped up. He was a junior, technically not a junior, but he has my dad's first name, and then he has my middle name. And so all three boys are their middle names are Atu. It's and the first names, except for my youngest brother because he's named after my father. His name's Cecil. But my uncle would always talk about us in this way. He says, "Here come the Atus," like Star Wars, right? And so we would still catch a little flack for the names, but most people call me Mac. Most people that I've known throughout my military career call me Mac. My family calls me D. The only people me by my full government name are my mom and my grandma.
Yeah.
So that's where Mac
Okay.
comes from.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's just a phenomenal story, and to have that history and to know that your roots are from Nigeria. Wow. Wow, right? My family, they're doing their ancestry DNA and all of that stuff, and every time we do a different one, like it comes back a little bit different, and so it's just
Yeah.
like, man, it's just a puzzle to try to figure it out because of, and obviously this podcast is not about this, but just all the destruction and the tearing apart of families and stuff. That did happen, 200 plus years ago. And it's just, it's a journey to really find what your roots are. So I also commend Alex Haley for doing that, and I pray that one day that my family can do the same, because what's the adage? When you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. This has been a great podcast. I have enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you better a little bit. Hopefully the audience have enjoyed this journey. But as I do with all of my guests, I'd like to give you like the last few words, and it's really just to help the audience that comes in to listen, right? Because we're all busy. We have selective hearing. Sometimes we don't have time to listen to the entire podcast, but the folks who follow me understand, like right at the end, probably the last 5, maybe 10 minutes, it's going to give you just like the down and dirty of, hey, this is what I need you to walk away with. And so I'll put it back in your court. If there's one thing that you could leave with the listeners today, that you want them to take away from this podcast, what would be that one thing that you would want to leave for them?
The one thing that I'll say is just the importance of maintaining contact with family throughout your journey. Your family is going to have an effect on the way that you see life. It's going to have an effect on you know how bad you want things. It's going to have an effect on the things that you're going to do in the future. And I always bring this back to my immediate family. My wife is my rock. She's the reason why I've done the things that I've done. My children are the reason why I continue to do the things that I do. And I've got grandkids, and those grandkids are going to eventually dig up grandpa's medals and awards and history years down the road, and hopefully they see it as something that they need to live up to as well. And so it's I guess really it's about legacy, but myopically it's about family.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know some folks out there may have estranged families may find themselves in a space where they don't necessarily have blood relatives that are close, or they don't have any. I was just talking to a young man the other day who was saying that it was just him and his wife, and then they had like two other family members. That's it. Like nobody else is here. And so the one thing that I would say about that, we have our blood relatives, and then we have the family that we choose, right?
Yeah.
And so going back to what you said, Mac, I think that's important, because family also provides, or at least should provide, that accountability. And so, you talked about your wife multiple times as far as why have you achieved the things that you've achieved, and it's because she has pushed you, right? She has competed with you in a healthy manner. And it's important to have accountability, whether it's the family you choose or the family that God gave you, from the very
Yeah.
beginning, if you should have that still remaining. And so, thank you for those words of advice that you left our guests with. Thank you for coming on the show. We at Espresso Unicorn definitely appreciate you, and we're gonna have you back on. We're already talking about another podcast that I'm looking at doing with you, and kind of having a panel. And so, family out there with Espresso Unicorn, I hope you come back and you listen to that podcast as well, because I will tell you that it will be dynamic. That is for sure, because we're looking at having Dr. Omar Simpson back on as well, and having Mac on, to kind of fill in that historical side of the house as it relates to the topic. And I'll leave the topic out for right now, but it will definitely be a eye-opening topic, and a interesting perspective in which we approach it. But at the end of the day, I appreciate you, Michelle Pierre from Espresso Unicorn, that you're here with us, and that you continue to tune in to our podcast, and I hope that you will continue to do so. So as always, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.